teaching Cambridge IGCSE Mathematics. So that's pretty much grade 9 and 10. So most of you who might be teaching one of these syllabus codes or both of them. So today we're going to be comparing a bit of the differences and then going into detail about each one's paper structure and the core and extended and generally everything you need to know if you want to teach this syllabus. Okay. So basically for Tutopia, we offer mathematics under two different codes, right? The 0580 code, which is most commonly done in the Middle East and in the Southern Asian countries, I think. And then there is the Cambridge IGCSE Mathematics, which is 0607, the code. So that is mainly done in Singapore and Malaysia. So most of the students do this one, right? So you might be an IGCSE maths teacher, but please be aware which one you're quite used to teaching, right? So certain countries are more familiar with this one, but this is the one that's primarily done by our student base. So this is the one that we had to focus on. But today's is basically about both. So we're generally going to have a run through of both. So beginning with the 0580 syllabus, okay? So under this syllabus, if we just look at the breakdown of the topics, so we'll start on that, I think, generally. Here we are. These are the topics. So there are 9 chapters, number, algebra and graphs, coordinate geometry. Then you can see geometry, mensuration, trigonometry, vectors and transformations, and probability and statistics. So these are the 9 main chapters. And regardless of which syllabus the students are doing, both syllabuses offer the students the choice of doing core or extended, right? So if you're really smart, you would do the extended syllabus. The quite weaker ones go for the core syllabus. Now, remember that if you sit for the core, the highest grade you can obtain is a C. So you might have scored 100% in all the papers, you can still only get a C, right? If you want anything higher than a C, then you must go for the extended curriculum. So you can see if you sit extended, you can go from a D all the way to an A star, okay? And generally, everything that a core student learns has to be learned by the extended student plus a lot more. That's how it is, okay? So everything the core learns and more. Now, coming to the core and extended, generally what you will see is the core component is heavily towards the number chapter and the shape and space chapter. Percentage-wise, you can see the composition of the core papers are more towards those two areas. While for extended students, although shape and space is equally important, algebra is also given a lot of importance. So depending on the student that you're teaching, please try and focus on the necessary chapters that they need to really do well in their exams, okay? So if you're teaching somebody who is a bit weak, now you can see that number, shape, and space should be the areas that you really get them to practice on, and you don't have to give too much stress on probability and statistics, but a little bit medium work on algebra, right? So that's how we try it and focus. So going forward, in terms of assessments, so you can see this is the paper structure, okay? So core students sit a completely different paper to extended students. Okay, so core students will sit paper 1 and paper 3, while extended students will sit paper 2 and paper 4. So you can see the number of marks in each paper is differing, as well as the amount of time that the papers are sat. So you can see the extended papers are actually longer by half an hour. That also can be seen here. And also, you can see the percentage of weightage. So that is, there's a 35% weightage of the final score on the first paper or the second paper for the extended kids. And there's a 65% weightage on paper 3 or paper 4, depending on which one you're doing. Okay, so basically the structured question paper is a bit more hefty than the short answer questions. Okay, another thing to notice is that all these papers, regardless of whether you're core or extended and which paper you're sitting, all these papers can use a scientific calculator. Okay, and it also mentions that you have to use 3 significant figures for answers where possible. And if you do not use pi, then usually the calculator value of 3.142 is what is going to be taken for the question. So these are the three main bullets that you have to remember. Okay, so going forward, I will just show you how these syllabuses are actually laid out. Most of you have gone through them for sure. So you can see how they structure it is the core syllabus bullet points. So these are all the things a core student would need to know under this particular area, right? So you can see the extended curriculum is pretty much the same few points will be there. So if you compare those two pages, you will see the same 2 points will be there, but there'll be an additional few points. So you can see core might be only a few points. Extended has more than that, right? So always that will be the case, okay? And coming to the calculator usage, so like I mentioned earlier, for 0580, you will have to use the scientific cal. Okay, I'm going to try and move. How do I move this bar? Why is that button not? Oh, there we are. Okay. That'll be easier for me. Oh dear, I do not want, okay. Today is not going to be one of those friendly Zoom days, is it? Okay, here it comes, using the calculator. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this. I just pulled this up of Save My Exams. I don't know how many of you actually use this website. It's quite a useful website if you want to get off topic questions and stuff like that for the different subjects, but mainly for maths as well. They have the topic questions, the past papers. They have a few revision notes as well. So you might find this site very useful. Just to show you though, so these are the general scientific calculator stuff, right? So this is the general thing. And oh dear, I don't want to play the video with sound. How do I make that? Okay. So you can see that they generally explain what kind of things they use the calculator for, but mainly it is for number topics, right? So things like square roots, you need to teach the children how to enter a square root on these calculators. So you can see generally there's a button like this that's available. Some students do not know how to convert when the answer comes in a fraction form to convert it into decimal form. So you might need to introduce them to that button. For trigonometry questions, of course, there is a sine, cos, and tan. So you might need to use those features, log buttons. Now, there are certain calculators which are acceptable in Cambridge examinations and certain which are not, okay? So Cambridge actually has a list of acceptable, usually Casio is the brand that most students use. So the Casio calculators, you can get the list. So ensure that your student is using the correct calculator that they are able to take for their exam from the beginning, right? Because they shouldn't get used to something that they can't and then last minute they can't take it in. But yes, so feel free to teach them all the tips and tricks on the calculator. Sometimes some students use things like calculating the mean. They use the sum function of the calculator to calculate the mean as well. So it takes less time, right? So that's something you all can have a look at and think about as well when you go for the students. But generally, there's always a question under the number topic which asks you to give your answer as a decimal. And then usually a follow-up question on this would be round it to the nearest significant figure or round it to 2 decimal places or something like that. And then usually there's a percentage error question that is coming under this. So usually that's how the structure for these questions go. But other than that, you will be allowed to use the calculator throughout the paper. So wherever you need to multiply and use hard fractions and numbers, feel free to tell them how they can use their calculator to help, right? Timing is everything. So you have to try and teach them to use it in the minimum time possible. Okay, so going forward, now if I just jump into the learner guide, right? So if you actually put into Google the learner guide, so there's a learner guide which comes for this particular 0580. The learner guides are very interesting because they give you nice, interesting comments and tips of the different areas. So you can see it tells you about the topics, what comes under each topic, which are the specific topics that come under extended only. So you can see sets, exponential growth and decay, extended only. And then we have the linear programming and functions also extended only, and matrices is extended only. So These are specific areas. And another thing you will realize is matrices does not come under 0607, the other syllabus. So there's going to be slight differences between the topics that come under this syllabus and the other one as well. So when you're teaching, please be careful that you're keeping strictly to what is under the syllabus for that particular respective student, right? We shouldn't be teaching anything that's for the other one and vice versa, because it will confuse them from what they learned in school. So if you're not sure, please refer back to the syllabuses and make sure you're happy with what you're seeing, right? So going from there, why I wanted to bring this up. So here you can see what kind of things they do. They give you nice tips. So of course, these things we all know, right? Number of marks is always shown next to the question. And usually IGCSE papers have the answer blank where you can write the answers in there. And it is telling you that you can't use graphical calculators. This is for 0580, right? And you can see paper 1, short answer, paper 3, the long answer. You can see when it means long answer, what they mean is basically each question has multiple parts. So part A, part B, and part C. As a maths teacher who has been teaching for quite a while, just a few things for you all to remember. Minutes is time, right? So when you're doing past paper questions with your students, if the mark is 2 marks, try and get the student to do that particular question in 2 minutes, sorry. If they don't manage it in 2 minutes, then, I mean, it's our responsibility to see how much longer they take. How can we get them adjusted so that they can do it in a shorter amount of time? That is very important, right? So please look into those things from the beginning. Don't leave it until like March when they have to sit the paper in May and then start timing the papers. It's very difficult for them to change their system then. They have to get used to it from the beginning of the second year itself, right? Because they have mocks in December and all that. So please keep that in mind. And you can see it gives you quite a few things about tips. So of course, reading questions carefully is something you have to do regardless of which paper you're doing. And accuracy. Okay, so teach your children importance of accuracy. So if the answer is given, like if it asks you to 1 decimal place or something, you have to give it to 1 decimal place. If it doesn't mention, then you have to go for 3 significant figures. You know, you have to teach them that as well from the beginning, not leave it till the end where they are rounding as they want and then finally they forget to do it in the final paper because they lose the final mark, right? Usually there's always 1 answer mark, which is for the exact form of the answer. So please ensure your students get that after all the hard work. And of course, units. So if the units is not given on the paper, so for example, the $ or the pound sign, do teach your students to put that in as well, okay? And as much as you can, working is important, right? So please tell not to directly copy answers, even if they get into issues with copying and stuff. If there is working, then we know that they have not copied, right? So that's quite important. So if they have done a wrong working and wrong answer, it's always only a 1 line that has to be crossed through. Please don't encourage them to scribble. They do that a lot. It's not allowed, right? So at the same time, the usual things about what is required for the exam. So always ensure that your students, when they're preparing for whatever exam, class or the final, that they make sure they take the calculator. A protractor is a must. And of course, compasses for construction diagrams, and the usual pencil case with rulers, pencils, pens is always required, right? So this tip is quite important for any exam, I believe. If you are stuck, don't waste time, go to the next question. So I always encourage that. So if your student is someone who loves to skim read questions, then they can use the first 2-3 minutes of the paper to quickly jump through and skim read the different topics that have come in the paper and maybe focus on questions that they are really sure to get right and do those first, and then go back to the beginning of the paper and do the ones that they are not too sure of. That is one possible option for the kids. But most kids just prefer to go in the order of the paper itself, question 1, 2, 3. But even then, if they read a question and nothing comes to mind about how to answer that question, please encourage them to skip the question completely and move on. Now, in paper 1 or paper 2, the questions are quite small, 1 answer, right? 1 word answered once. So it's either you know it or you don't, Okay, so those questions you have to skip. Now, when you come to paper 4 and paper 3, those are more structured questions. And usually what Cambridge does is they usually have, what do I say, like, you will see, like, if part A is a question, there might be a show that, right? Show that, for example, a trigonometry question where it comes like, show that the answer is 52 degrees or something. And then from part B, it will be another part of a triangle or something. And often what Cambridge does is the answer that has been calculated in part A has to be used for part B and part C, etc. So if your student does not manage to do the show that question, okay, if they don't manage to do it, use the show that answer that is given on the paper and make sure they attempt to do part B or part C and answer those, because then they at least get the marks there. Now, let's say if, for example, for part A, there is no show that, and they don't know how to figure out the answer, but they need that answer for part B and part C. What you can tell the children to do is at least tell them to write an incorrect answer. If they don't know how to do it, it's fine. Tell them, for example, if it says calculate X or something, they don't know how to calculate X, not a problem. Tell them to write X is equal to 10, for example. Okay. And then use that 10 to do part B and part C. If they have by chance used that 10 and done part B and part C well, then what happens is they get all the method marks. They will only lose the final answer mark. So that is better than nothing, right? So instead of losing all 10 marks in a question, they would have at least gathered 5 marks by doing half of each question by the methods. So please encourage those kind of things as well. So you might think, why is it coming again? It's actually showing for the extended paper separately and for the core paper separately, right? So that's that. And yeah, so they actually tell you about the common mistakes. Okay, so something that you can see. So let me see. Okay, they have given a lot of detail of what this how to read these questions, what does it mean by not to scale. So this is why a learner guide I feel is quite useful. I'm not going into detail about it, but as a tutor, when you're teaching the student, make sure you teach them each of these words. Like when it says calculate, what does the student have to do? When it says find, what does the student have to do? Things like state means that you already know the answer. Can you just write it down, you know? And of course, what I often see is when there are questions like this, often the student misses the question 1 and jumps straight to part 2. I don't know why they misread or skip read that part, and they don't think that there has to be anything done for that. So always tell your students to see if there's a mark given next to everything. That means there's something that needs to be done for that particular part, right? For part 1, you have to use the grid and draw it. For part 2, you have to complete the table. So those kind of things, please keep in mind. Always give an idea. As far as reading the mark schemes go, this is more for something for you all to learn and understand, not for the student to understand how to read the mark scheme. But of course, if there are some keen students who would like to know if they do a past paper, how they can self-mark, then you can teach them how to do that, right? So you can see there's nice structures of things as well. So you can see it tells you about how the student can improve. So these are things that you can read through and maybe you can pick up some ticks yourself. So you can see here the common mistakes, okay? The common mistakes are mostly accuracy, like I said, they forget to round it. Misinterpretation is always there. They do something other than what the question is asking for. Lack of knowledge, of course, there are certain kids who just don't know how to do a question. That's fine, right? Not checking answers. Now, please always encourage your student not to finish, give the paper and leave or sleep on the desk in exams. They have to try and continually check the papers, check their answer as much as possible. Don't be lazy to retype massive calculations for trigonometry in your calculator. Always check the sine, cos, and tan has been entered correctly. Have you put the inverse button for sine, cos, and tan? You know, those things are things that we have to, insert into the student's mindset of thinking from the beginning, right? So you could always give them a sort of thinking pattern. Okay, have I done the question? Yes. If I've done the question, am I confident of the question? If I'm not confident of the question, is there another method by which I could try the question? Is there a way I can insert the answer that I have found and check whether I have got the right answer? Those kind of things, you know, they should be like a set of thinking patterns for your children, right? So this general advice is also quite nice for you to go through with your students close to exams, just as a set of points that they can also remember, you know, show your working, read carefully, understanding key terms. So these are the common advice that we usually give, right? So, and this is mainly a revision checklist and a revision planner for students to use. But actually, so it tells you about the importance of mind maps and how you can revise and stuff like that. But this is what I love. Okay, so here is something that you can advise your students to do. So there's one set of lists for core and then one set of lists for extend as well. So what you can see is each particular topic, each subtopic, and there is a red, average, and green. Okay, so you can ask the student, or you yourself as a teacher close to the exam can give a question on each of these areas and see which is the area they're doing well, which is the area they're weak at, which is the area they're average. So then close to the exams, all the red ticks is the stuff that the student has to focus on and re-go through with you in a revision session, right? So those are the things you can focus on and see. So you can see that Cambridge has done a nice thing. I don't think the learner guide is available for the 0607 syllabus, or as far as I researched, it is not, but you can always use this as an idea to bring up one for that. Like you can create one for that syllabus as well using this sort of idea as well, right? So you can see it's a tick, and you can tick which one he can do well, which one he can't. So you know, your parents also, you could always take a picture of this and send it across through the support team to the parent to show where the student is lacking, so the parent also knows. So it's a very nice guide for you to follow from the beginning with your students, right? So very important there. Okay, so that's basically syllabus number 1. So going forward to syllabus number 2, which is the Cambridge IGCSE International Mathematics. Often the students refer to it as CIM, right? For short, CIM. So if they're talking about CIM, they're talking about this syllabus, okay? And under this syllabus, I'll show you there's some changes compared to both of them. That is what we're going to discuss about in today's session, right? So one thing that you will strikingly see is the number of topics. Now, earlier we had 9 chapters. This is actually 11 chapters. What you will see is that the chapter of sets actually was not a separate chapter earlier. It was falling under number. Okay, so now it's like a separate chapter altogether. And also functions. Functions was not a separate chapter in the previous one, but here it is seen as a separate chapter. Other than that, the other topics are pretty much common between the two. Okay, and the same thing about core and extended curriculum applies for this syllabus as well, right? Now, the only thing you need to be very careful of is the graphic display calculator. Okay, so like I said in the previous case, you were allowed to use scientific calculators. Okay, so you were allowed to use scientific calculators, the Cambridge Casio ones, which most of us have at least some sort of idea. This is the graphic display calculator, often known as the GDC by the kids. Okay, so if they're saying they need to go get the GDC, they're talking about grabbing their calculator. Okay, and often the graphic display calculator, for those of you who haven't seen or haven't come across it, it's a calculator like this, right? So you can actually insert equations of graphs and the calculator would be able to plot it for you. So you see, even parabolas and stuff, they can enter the equation of the parabola. It will just plot it right there. So you can trace what is the minimum point, what is the axis cutting points. Those things and all can be actually got from the calculator itself. So because of that, certain things that the students need to like know very, very carefully for the 0580 syllabus, They don't have to for this one because the calculator can assist them. So as teachers, it's very important for you all to just have a run through of the areas and have an idea for which the graphic calculator can be used. And those areas you can get the students to practice. So here it says the things that they should be able to do, right? They should be able to sketch a graph, produce a table of values for a function. So that is basically if you have fx is equal to x squared, for example, and if you insert x as 2, 4, and 6, you should be able to get the values for y or fx through the calculator itself. For all the different values, you should be able to get it. Finding zeros, so zeros we're talking about is basically intercepts, right? X-intercepts, Y-intercepts, maximum points, minimum points of the function, intersection points of two graphs. So you are able to insert two particular functions into the graphic display calculator and see which points meet, what is the meeting point, etc. And you also can use the graphic display calculator to find mean, median, and quartiles, because if you insert the data set in a way into the calculator, it will automatically calculate for you all of this. Okay, so feel free to go through a lot of YouTube tutorials and stuff like that about how these can be done, because it's not very difficult to do. If you are someone who is definitely having a lot of students or going to take a lot of students, you could purchase your own graphic display calculator and then try these functions out. Otherwise, there are online versions of graphic calculators as well, which you can maybe download and practice. But best is make sure you know how what buttons the student needs to press in order to achieve these things, right? Because when you're going through past paper questions, if the student says they have forgotten how to do this on their calculator, we as teachers should be able to explain, okay, this is what you do, take this particular button, press this button, and use this button and get it. So if you need to make yourself a little notebook with, you know, what buttons need to be clicked in what order and stuff like that, you can do, so that you're prepared for these kind of questions when the student brings them to you. At the same time, in terms of calculators, graphic calculators, most graphic calculators will be the TI one. Okay, so it's usually TI 83, TI 84, or TI Inspire. Those are the ones that are provided by schools. So in Singapore, what they do for most of the schools, they allow the student to borrow the calculator for the year. These calculators are super expensive. So generally they borrow for the year. They are allowed to purchase ones for themselves as well, I think. So both options are available. So please look into having an idea about the calculators, right? So going forward, again, there will be certain calculators that will not be permitted. So you have to cross-check whether these are permitted. And then coming to problem solving requirements, okay, as much as 0580 is more theoretical type of syllabus, this syllabus requires a lot of practical application. Okay, so they really check whether the student is able to apply everything that they have learned as a concept to the real life circumstance. So for example, trigonometry, when maybe you're leaning a ladder against a wall, for example, or modeling the swing as a trigonometric sigmoidal function sort of thing. So always there's a practical application they really link in. Okay, so and they always believe in interpretation and communicating the results. So they will ask you, okay, what does this show you, sort of thing. So coming to the assessment overview, I want to point out some differences. So earlier also we had separate papers for core, separate papers for extended. We noticed that there's a short answer paper and a structured paper. And we also noticed that usually the core students have a lower amount of time when they do the paper compared to extended students. Now, when you come to this syllabus, you can see there's quite a bit of a change. Earlier, the calculators were allowed in all the papers. Here, you can see that calculators are not permitted in paper 1 or paper 2. Okay, so they are not allowed to take the calculator for this particular exam, which means when you're doing past papers or doing any sort of practice questions from these papers, ensure that the calculator is not used by your student and that they're trying to do those mental math questions, right? So they have to do it mentally so that they get used to it, okay? So that needs to be something you have to watch out for when you teach this syllabus. Another thing is you can notice the same time has been given for paper 1 and paper 2, as well as the same number of marks. Okay, and the same, roughly the same weightage. It's a bit more for paper 1, but a little less for paper 2. Okay, and then you can see that there is the structured paper we saw earlier, and this time we are allowed to use graphic calculators for both. This is 60% of the weightage, so the hefty mark is always in these papers. And again, you can see it's half an hour more for paper 4 than paper 3. But what we didn't have in the previous syllabus is the existence of paper 5 or paper 6. So you can see that paper 5 is an investigation paper, again, a separate hour for that. And again, you can see paper 6 is investigation and modeling, and it is given 1 hour 40 minutes. So basically half an hour extra compared to paper 5. But importantly, you can see that graphic calculators are used. The weightage is 15% and 20%. But this investigation and modeling paper might be a new ball game for not only students, for us as teachers as well. You might not have seen it or heard of it. So today, I think is a good idea if I just, oh, wait, I think on this itself, does it have, oh, there's no past papers available, is it? Oh, there we are. Okay. Let me just pull up a past paper of a paper 5 or a paper 6 to show you. I think more so a paper 6, because that is the common one that everybody does, right? Extended is the common syllabus. So you can see paper 6, what you will see is there's 2 parts to it. Part A is the investigation, okay? And part B, we call it modeling. And usually the type of questions that come in this is either related to trigonometrical functions like the sigmoid curves and stuff like that, or exponential functions, or functions as a general topic, maximum, minimum stuff, usually gets chosen as one of the topics for these 2 areas. Another very common topic is sequences, right? Sequences often comes under these areas. And another topic I'm trying to think of, mensuration. So different, so like, you know, first it'll start off with, okay, I have a ball with this much volume. Then I'm going to pour the contents of the ball into some square or something. And, you know, it'll be a buildup of questions from there. So there are questions like that. And statistics also somewhat. But what it is basically a continual investigation. So it's just like what the title says, right? So you can see first it asks you calculate the sum of the integers. Then it is extending that to a few other sequences. Then it will ask you to see if there's any pattern that you can see from the table. Then you have to write down what you are analyzing and what you're seeing. So then it will ask you to, write it like an nth term situation. Okay, so it will bring your, bring it more to like an nth term situation where they'll ask you, okay, can you come up with a nth term or a common thing that can be applied from the pattern you have spotted above? Can you come up with something like that? And then it continues. So they change that slightly in part 4. So see, now the above part changes to k plus n minus 1. Here it was k plus 99. Here it goes to k plus n minus 1. And then they ask, can you show that it comes to this? So you can see it's a continual set of explanations and questions. So it is one of the most hated papers by students that I have had to work with, okay? They absolutely detest it because it's like, you know, if you don't understand one part throughout until question 7, where the investigation ends, everything is relying on understanding that one area, because it's like one after the other, it'll keep on picking it up and going from there. Now see here, they have given the formula now. So if you didn't know how to prove this formula, at least you can use this formula to try and do part A and B for question 5. So that's what I was mentioning earlier, right? So those kind of things you need to practice from the beginning. Okay, question 6 is not something the student, regardless of how much of a bright spot they are, students really suffer with paper 6 in terms of time and in terms of also understanding how to tackle the paper. It's quite a tough thing. So from the beginning itself, my advice would be, so if you're teaching them the sequences topic, then itself introduce them to a sequence style investigation question. Okay, because in the mocks and all also the teacher always puts one question which is from paper 6 or paper 5, depending if it's a core student. So always try and get them to practice from then itself, because they have to understand how these modeling questions work. And often you have to use the graphic display calculator as well. So you have to bring it in. So again, you can see this one is a speed, distance, time question, I think. So again, it starts off with basic x seconds, then see now they're asking find an expression of b in terms of x. Then they will try and ask, okay, so if it changes to this much of a distance, how will the formula change? Can you show that the overall formula is like this? So you can see that it builds and builds. So things like this, the graph drawing and all, maybe they'll be able to draw it in the calculator itself. So they simply just need to look at the calculator and they need to just copy that whatever has come on their screen, they have to copy it here. Okay. And they should know how to insert the range for x so that the graph that is coming on their screen is only from 0 to 60, for example. There is ways to restrict the x axis and y axis as well. So you can see this is where all the analysis skills come in, right? The student has to really understand the depth of the question, analyze what's happening, and then you see it's going on further and further. Again, a different model, now another graph for the revised model. So it's like a continual set of questions in 2 different areas that they have to do. And as we've seen already, it's like 20% of their entire mark, right? So it's quite an important paper. Often the students that miss out the A star are also because of this paper, because they mess up this one. And unfortunately, although they have done really well on the other 2 papers, this kind of costs them the A star. So especially if your student is a bright spot, this needs to be one paper that they have to focus on from the beginning. And also going for things like at the end, if you know your student is weak, then it's about how can you get them to get the majority of the paper in majority of the marks in this paper. But the one thing is, we as teachers also, we cannot prepare for this paper. We also don't know what type of a question will come for investigation or what type of a question will come for modeling. They can only practice. So you just have to get them to do as many variants of the papers as possible to get them and, accustomed to the style of the wording and the type of things that come up. Okay, what I have seen is the ones who practice the most is the ones who have performed the best in these papers. So please advise them to do so. So those are the main things. Now, going back to the syllabus, now, please don't assume that every point from 1 to 13 or whatever under this particular syllabus is there in the other one. You will often see there's a few changes here and there. Some striking differences that you may come across, for example, can you see this one? Use of a graphic display calculator to solve equations, including those which may be unfamiliar. So for example, cubic equations and stuff. Now we know we can't solve those unless they're factorizable, right? For especially kids of this age group. So those kind of equations and all, when you see it, and if it's only like a 1 mark or 2 mark, it must be a question that can be answered with the GDC. So always think of, can this be answered with the GDC, and try the student to get in there. So another thing is, this point, of course, you won't find in the 0580 syllabus, right? So that's a difference in the syllabuses as well. And I don't think matrices as a topic exists here. I think upper lower boundaries is a topic that is there in 0580, but it is not there here. So those kind of things, there's a slight difference. So again, here you can see solutions of quadratic equations. It's also giving using a graphic display calculator. Okay, so in the 0580 syllabus, you have to do it using factorization or the quadratic formula. You can't use it using graphic display, but here it gives you that option. So as a teacher, please be aware what the student can use the calculator for, so that it's easier for you. But always keep in mind, paper 1 or paper 2 cannot use the calculator, so you have to do it without, right? Yep, so that is pretty much that. And then, of course, formula booklets, right? So I just realized I have not done that. But Yeah, there is usually a formula sheet, it is a sheet, right, that you can use for IGCSE, but I don't think going forward anyway, is there a formula sheet? Not right. Anyway, more. Oh, there it is. This one. So this is the formula that is provided on the extended papers 2 and 4. So they actually give you these set of formulae. But what is my advice? As much as possible, try and get them to memorize, especially the important ones, like the quadratic formula, they should try and memorize, right? Okay, the surface area volume one's tricky, fine, don't focus too much. But the trigonometry ones like A sine, B sine and stuff, even the rearranged version. So you can tell them the benefit of using this version of the formula or using the reciprocal version, sine A over A equals sine B over B, because that might be more useful when you're finding angles and easier for weaker kids to remember if they don't know how to rearrange and solve such equations, and so those kind of things, please feel free to go forward. And of course, if your student is extra smart and they like to know the why these formulas are the way they are, then you feel free to prove and show those formulas to your students as well. Okay, but what I always advise from the beginning is, if you can ask them to keep a mind map from the beginning when you start classes with the student, if you can get a mind map done under each and every area, you accumulate all the formulas. Now see, for example, percentage increase, percentage decrease, there's no formula, but there is a method, right? We all know there's a specific set of buttons that we have to do. Or for example, compound interest or simple interest. Now see, those formulas don't come under this, but your student needs to memorize it. Okay, so if you can come up with a mind map or a list at least that the student can write down or accumulate as they go through with lessons with you, so that finally at the end they have a list with all the formulae they need, and then you all can tick the important ones that they have to memorize, because you know that they're not going to be given them for sure in this list, so it's easier for you also to keep an eye out, because we presume the student knows the formula, and then come the mock and the exams, we realize they have forgotten it, and that's why they have lost the mark. It's something that has happened often. So please raise importance for sticking the formulas around their house and memorizing it from the beginning. And you should often ask them, okay, what is the formula for this? And they should be able to recall and tell you. If they're not at that stage, you should keep asking that question. Then they will make it a point to learn it, because you're keeping on asking them the question, right? So that is something I think I had to share. Of course, the command words are also there at the end of the syllabus. So these command words, maybe you can go through them closer to the exam, or when you're doing the past papers for the first time, you can highlight each word when you're going through the question and say, okay, when it tells you this is what they're expecting from you. When it tells you this is what they want from you. Especially for words in the paper 6 and paper 5, where they have to, really explain and analyze and understand the model. It's important they understand what kind of words mean what, so that they know exactly what to write. Because you can often see in these paper 6s and stuff, there's like a wordy question, right? Where they have to write the answer in words. There's no numbers there. So they have to equally be good at explaining what they want to say. So that's what you have to train them to do here. So if their English is not par, that's okay. How can we try to get them to convey what they want to say in a way that the examiner will understand? That's also, as a tutor, it's our duty as well, right? Okay, so I think I have pretty much talked for like 45 minutes, and I think I have covered a lot of areas, and you might have a lot of questions. So I'm open to questions right now, so that you all can let me know on things that I may help you all on, please. Feel free to type in the chat or voice the questions. Either is okay. Alrighty, silence either means everyone has understood everything and there is no questions. Okay, clear for me. Thank you. That's great news. And everyone else, I think there's about 11 or 12 initially it was, and now 11. All righty. Well, if you all anyway come across any questions when you're teaching the student and you need me to clarify, feel free to put me a message. But other than that, thank you very much for joining the session. If you all have any feedback for my session and that also, please feel free to let me know so that I can improve going forward. But other than that, all the best. Hopefully this session was useful for you. All right. Thank you. Good to know. Thank you. Bye-bye. Teaching Cambridge IGCSE Mathematics. So that's pretty much grade 9 and 10. So most of you who might be teaching one of these syllabus codes or both of them. So today we're going to be comparing a bit of the differences and then going into detail about each one's paper structure and the core and extended and generally everything you need to know if you want to teach this syllabus. Okay. So basically for Tutopia, we offer mathematics under two different codes, right? The 0580 code, which is most commonly done in the Middle East and in the Southern Asian countries, I think. And then there is the Cambridge IGCSE Mathematics, which is 0607, the code. So that is mainly done in Singapore and Malaysia. So most of the students do this one, right? So you might be an IGCSE maths teacher, but please be aware which one you're quite used to teaching, right? So certain countries are more familiar with this one, but this is the one that's primarily done by our student base. So this is the one that we had to focus on. But today's is basically about both. So we're generally going to have a run through of both. So beginning with the 0580 syllabus, okay? So under this syllabus,